Welcome to the funnel. My name is John Shea, and I'm president of Alignment Group. This is episode number 254 of the funnel. Do your salespeople follow up enough? Should be, do your salespeople follow up in some cases? Before we begin, I want to remind you to head on over to alignment-group.com/the funnel. Subscribe to episode number 254 or any of the episodes if you so choose. And you will receive not only the weekly show notes, but a free coaching call, 30-minute coaching call with me. Once you sign up, there's a page that pops up as a thank you. There's a link there to my calendar. Go ahead and click that link and schedule a time for your coaching call. Today's agenda: no. Why? What you can do about it, and technology. So why did I start with no? These are your typical responses when you ask about leads. I remember, I'll tell you a quick story because I think this is interesting. My friend and one of my mentors, Bill, I worked with Bill for many years. Amazing sales guy, just an amazing ability to drive business. He was a manager and a director and a VP and all that good stuff, and hired me years ago to come work for him as a manager. And Bill used to ask reps about leads, and I'd sit there and I'd watch him, and he'd get a smile on his face, and he'd walk back to his office. They'd give him some response. I left a message, I called, I sent an email, whatever it was, and he'd go back to his office, and inevitably he would get that person on the phone. He'd have a conversation and schedule a meeting. And I think the point to doing that is that, yeah, you might have left a message, but you really didn't do a whole lot of follow-up. And I think a lot of sales reps come back with the typical sales responses on that. Well, the lead's bad. I called and left a message. I emailed and they didn't get back to me. And when you start digging deeper, there's a lot of maybe answers that you don't want to hear. Maybe they left a voicemail message, sure. But how many times did you call them? How many times did you email or try to connect in some other way? That's the question. And I think what happens when we ask, hey, whatever happened to, they respond in a very typical fashion. Now, if they're using the CRM and documenting all their activity, you won't have to ask that question because I've talked about that in the past. But I think in this case, you have to look past the initial response, because I think if you're not getting that feedback and you're not getting the business from leads or prospects that you think you should be getting as a company, then you need to dig deeper into what exactly is going on with your team. And I can give you some reasons why I think they tend to follow up less than they should, and I think we'll cover some of that. But ultimately, it comes down to the individual, and it comes down to how they decide to manage and operate their daily schedule. So let me give you some of those reasons. One, they don't want to be too pushy, right? In today's world, there's a lot of confusion with salespeople, a lot of confusion on what they can and can't do. On one hand, you've got people like the challenger sales that are telling you need to challenge prospects. You need to hit it a little harder. Some people get confused by that and feel like that's pushy. I don't necessarily believe that that's what they're saying. I think they're saying question the status quo. But a sales rep might get concerned about being a little too pushy on a prospect because they don't like to be pushed when they're buying something. Sometimes they just forget because they have no real follow-up mechanism in place. They get a lead, they make a call, and they send an email or whatever, and they don't get a response, and they move on with their day. And at some point, 2, 3, 4 weeks down the road, they remember, oh yeah, I need to follow up with that prospect. And by then, it's pretty much gone. The next one is sort of that self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, I'm required to follow up with a prospect, but I just don't think they're going to be interested or they're going to buy from me. And it could be any number of reasons. You've heard me tell the story of the cold calling. And my rep who didn't cold call the really old, sort of beat up building, but cold called the shiny brand new buildings. This is way back in the day when cold calling was the only way you could get prospects. And it turned out in the old building, people had purchased product over a number of them over the last 6 months. So sometimes they get it in their head that something is the way it is, or it's been too long, right? Let's say they forgot and it's been a month and now they feel silly. Well, we all make mistakes. So it's okay to send an email and say, hey, you know what? It got buried in my email box, or I usually set a reminder for myself. For some reason, I didn't do it this time, and I really apologize. I'm trying to connect with you regarding this opportunity, and you move on. It's okay. It's okay to do that. Now, if you do that on a regular basis, you have bigger problems. But once in a while, if you forget something, you just go back and fix it. The self-fulfilling prophecy of, well, they're not going to respond back to me now that it's been a week or 2 weeks, or they're not going to respond back to me because of this or that, or the title, or whatever it is something that they need to get over. But that's one of the reasons why. And I see it all the time. I used to be there at a very early age in my sales career. Like, why would they want to call me back? And I learned that that's not a way to live. Some people actually think after the first phone call or email that the prospect will call them back. And they're living in sort of a fantasy land with that if they think that's going to happen every time. It may happen once in a while. And I will tell you, the statistics are pretty strong to say that as soon as you get a lead, you call it. And you follow up with an email, because if you have a phone number, you call it because it's top of mind with them. You might actually get them on the phone, or you might actually get a response in an email. But generally speaking, people have other things going on in their lives. They have the day-to-day business that they're attending to in their job or their role at the company. They're not just a prospect. They have their personal lives to think of. So when they leave work, they're not thinking about buying your product. So sometimes it takes a little more than just a single call. And hey, I left a message waiting for a call back. And I think that kind of pops back up to they don't want to be pushy. And then finally, no one ever taught them how to follow up. They just assume, a lot of managers just assume that they know what they're doing. A lot of people who hire sales reps, they look at the resume, they believe what they see in the resume, they have a great conversation, and they just feel like they should know what they're doing. And my response to that would be, don't make any assumptions there. Don't take anything for granted. Be very clear on what your policy is on following up with prospects. And if you don't have one, you should get one in place, right? So, just because they seem to be good, or they're selling existing prospects, or they have some luck with prospects, doesn't mean they've been taught how to properly follow up with prospects. So don't get lost in the weeds on that one. So, what can you do about it? What can you do to change the landscape? So I'm going to talk a little bit about, kind of the way I would handle this if I were you and I was a little concerned about that. First, you could do nothing. I don't recommend that. You could basically say, it's okay, but it's going to end up biting you. If the follow-up's not strong and it's not good and you're not closing those leads, but the business is pretty decent, in the end, it's going to catch up with you, because sometimes the pipeline dries up. Sometimes the opportunities dry up, and the business will need to be gotten from somewhere else. That's one. Two, if you want to grow your company and you're doing well without it, how much more business could you get with the proper follow-up? Think about that. So I would do it this way. I would identify the problem, and I think there's a number of ways you can do it. You can do this over the landscape of the team, or you can do it by individual. My preference would be by individual. What kind of mechanism do you have in place to track the activities of your sales reps, especially when it comes to prospects and leads? If you don't, then you're going to have to work through that. And I would even do that. I wouldn't wait 6 months because I have to have a way to track it. That's just silly. You can do some manual things with your team, but I would track what they're doing and how they were doing. The way I would present it is, hey, there's no right or wrong here. I'm just trying to figure out how my team responds to leads and how my team treats prospects. The timing of your follow-up, how you follow up. What does that look like? What do the emails look like? What do the phone calls look like? So I really want to sit with you and talk to you about that and figure out how to get that done if you're not tracking it. So then what you have to do is, once you've identified that this is an issue, and you feel like it's an issue, then you need to track that work. How many times are they following up? What's the frequency between those calls and emails? If they're sending an email and then 3 weeks later they're sending another one, forget about it. It needs to be faster. And I'm telling you, it's 8 to 10 times before people respond back. So I would track, and I wouldn't pass judgment. Just track what they're doing and how they're doing it. They get a prospect, when do they call? When do they follow up with an email? If they have both, great, they should follow up in both with a phone call and an email. I wouldn't even tell them that. Just tell me how you do it now. And then just document all of it from your team. And I think you'll begin to see where the holes are. It's, the frequency isn't enough. They're getting phone number and email, and they're only calling the phone number, or they're only sending an email. They don't, they don't follow up at all in some cases. So what we're looking for here is for you to just document it. Okay. Then you develop a plan on what that looks like for the frequency, the timing, the method for follow-up, and put that in place, right? Then you put a plan in place to track that. If you're not tracking that activity, that's the kind of activity you should be tracking in your CRM. That might be a longer-term plan. And the way I would do that is, if you have a CRM and they're not using it, give them a manual report and say, this is what you have to do until you start putting it in the CRM. Once you start tracking the CRM, then we're fine. Now, I don't want to get into the weeds on your CRM, how manual it is versus automated. You want as automated as possible, okay? And that's going to be beneficial to everyone. So I'm going to give you some technology tips here, things you can use to track some of this and see how they're doing. One of the things that I use, and I know a lot of my colleagues and friends use, is email tracking. When I send an email out, I can see when people opened it. I can see when they read it. I can also see if I've attached it through my CRM, I can see if they've opened the attachment and read the attachment. That's really important when you're doing follow-up, right? And what I use is the HubSpot sales platform. It's like $50 a month per user, and it has some really cool stuff. First, it tracks your emails, and it does have a plugin or an add-on, I guess, for Microsoft Office, both the desktop version and the cloud version of Microsoft. And it does work with Gmail, works very well with Gmail. So you can use it with both of them. I think there's some limitations with Apple. You might want to look into that if you're thinking about it. But there's other products out there like Yesware and TowelTap. But I use the HubSpot in conjunction with the HubSpot CRM. Now, the value here is not only can I track emails, all of my email correspondence goes into the CRM, under the contact, under the account. When I make phone calls, I can call out of my CRM and document that call, and then just put notes in while I'm sitting there talking on the phone. Okay, can also schedule meetings through it. So there's a lot of really cool stuff in the HubSpot tool, the CRM and the sales email tracking tool. Now, they're two separate products, so keep that in mind. But you can run them separate of one another. So you can add the email tracking and not even use the CRM, okay? And what's available to you on that version is the tracking and the meetings and some other really cool stuff. I'm not going to get into all of it, but those are the technologies I would look into: tracking the work, tracking the email, tracking the phone calls. Like I said, there are other technologies out there you can take advantage of. Salesforce has Yesware, right? So Salesforce, you can track emails through Yesware. It's a pretty robust system, and they should be able to track all of their activity in there. But I would recommend that once you get the plan in place, if you don't have the technology, then you sort of you start moving towards that. And if you really don't use the CRM, I find that difficult to believe. Don't go crazy and just go feet first with the heaviest technology you can lift. Something like Zoho or HubSpot CRM are great starts. HubSpot's free, and I think Zoho has a free version, but HubSpot CRM is tons of stuff, tons of ability, and it's free. And it's a great way to track activity and pipeline. It's not the most robust CRM in the world, but you add that with the upgraded email tracking, the HubSpot sales, and you really have something there. So there are ways to do this. You just have to decide you want to do it. I would definitely look into the follow-up if I were a manager. New manager, old manager, existing manager, long-term team, it doesn't matter. You might be surprised what you find. Thank you for subscribing to The Funnel. If you haven't, head on over to lyman-group.com/thefunnel. You can find me on Facebook, Twitter at Shay John Art, LinkedIn. Email jshay@alignment-group.com, and of course my website. If you email me with a question, I will certainly get back to you. Sometimes I recommend that we do a coaching call because, to sign up for the funnel and then do a coaching call, because it's much quicker and we can cover a lot of ground in a one-on-one conversation for 30 minutes versus an email. Hang in there when you send me an email. I don't get back to you right away, but usually it takes a couple days and then I respond. Again, thanks for subscribing, and as always, keep filling the funnel.